last but never least, Daniel Kaufman, who is the co-director of the Endangered Language Alliance. Okay, Daniel, hit it.
So, thank you all for coming. I am, as was just said, Daniel Kaufman, assistant professor at the Linguistics Department at Queens College and co-founder of the Endangered Language Alliance. So for the next few minutes, I'll be talking to you a little bit about my work and about Ears on the Street, the linguistic version of Jane Jacobs' Eyes on the Street. As we know, Jane Jacobs' vision had a lot to do with safety, personal safety, in particular using urban design to crowdsource safety. For those of you who were here in the 80s like me, you know that personal safety issues are nothing like what they used to be. So for reasons that are still somewhat mysterious, we're now free to worry about the safety of things other than ourselves. Decades ago, the famous anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss already said all the essentials of humanity's artistic treasures could be found in New York. But for how long will that hold true? As a linguist, I'm most worried about the safety of languages, and New York City is, for me, above else, a Noah's Ark of languages. Pictured above is Queens, the county with the highest number of languages in the United States, and probably the most linguistically dense area in the world. It's an area with many layers of languages and ethnicities. The Sherpa Community Center in Jackson Heights is a good illustration of this, as they installed a traditional Sherpa door directly over an Irish church. Both groups came here to America and brought with them an endangered language, one which they're still fighting to keep alive here in New York. Ears on the Street involves many things for us. An important element is understanding the distribution of languages in New York City. This is a map I've been helping create for the forthcoming atlas entitled Nonstop Metropolis by Joshua Jelly Shapiro and Rebecca Solnit. Here we see two types of languages. Those in orange are national languages, which are represented by a collection in the Queens Library. And those in black are regional languages, which are not represented, and are in most cases unofficial languages that have been marginalized in their places of origin. It's thought that we may lose up to half of the world, or more than half of the world's languages by the end of this century. The languages in black are precisely the ones at risk. The endangered languages of urban diaspora range from Livonian, whose last speaker passed away in Toronto just a couple years after I recorded her, to languages like Ossetian with over 500,000 speakers. It's not the number of speakers, but rather the rate of transmission to children which make a language endangered. All of the languages listed there that we worked with have declining transmission rates. How did so many languages in New York City become endangered? And how did they get to New York City? Because of recent waves of immigration from places like the Himalayas and southern Mexico pictured here, we have an intense amount of linguistic diversity from places with endangered languages and incredibly high linguistic diversity. Yeah. So keeping our ears to the street also means asking why these languages are disappearing, and we do that through interviews and observation. In the interview pictured above, a Mixteca mother tells us about how she was admonished by her brother for speaking her indigenous language in front of her son's teacher. We're also interested in understanding what languages mean to their speakers. Instead of relying solely on the opinions of outsider linguists, we try to bring out the voices of those who are affected by language loss. Here's a nice example from our collaborator.
Allow dumuri le bareng be itele basub dirun itele basub dirun kata mulang itele basub dirun kata lame bagubriga bubaya itele basub dirun itele me hagabri itele me lubui do luma uribani le hadu be lumati itele la hawanseru luma dan lige lumo danle.
That was our collaborator Alex Colon speaking Garifuna, the last remnant of the indigenous languages of the Caribbean, now spoken on the Central American coast and in New York City. For Jane Jacobs, the enforcement behind Eyes on the Street was something like calling the police, but we don't believe in language police. So what's our equivalent? Well, we document. This is our office where students and collaborators are transcribing, translating, and analyzing language data collected here in New York City. In some cases, languages that we recorded in that very room that we thought were relatively safe became highly endangered in just over the course of our 5-year existence. For instance, this is a Neo-Aramaic language of Mosul in northern Iraq, whose speakers have all been attacked and expelled by ISIS.
تعلمد لك ويا قرفة وبليلك ويا حيل بسمتة تسهارة اقشت كله إيتاثل بيك ببروخة وقاد صهار بنشوات خثنة وكلفة كملالع بإيتاثة.
We recorded that and other narratives in New York in 2010. So Ears on the Street results in recording, documenting, and archiving, but our ultimate goal isn't to have a bunch of linguists like myself chasing other people's languages. It's rather to train the communities themselves in documenting their own languages, an activity that both creates long-lasting records as well as helping the youth appreciate the value of their language and culture. We're also concerned with bringing these languages to the public through the radio, the stage, or by any other means. Languages that were relegated to the shadows in their home countries can now be proclaimed loudly in New York City. These images are from public readings that we organized in Tlapaneco, or Pa, an indigenous Mexican language, as performed by poet Zenaida Cantu, and in Irish, performed by poet and professor Hilary Sweeney from NYU. Another crucial ingredient in aiding language transmission is the creation of language materials for children. Here's a video we made with our collaborator James Lavelle doing a sing-along with his Griffin and nursery rhymes. So Ears on the Street, in a nutshell, is awareness of the fragile linguistic diversity all around us. It's noticing, for instance, that in every restaurant and every deli, there are speakers of Mesoamerican languages that are struggling against centuries of discrimination and colonialism. We celebrate these civilizations in museums, but somehow we ignore the heirs to these cultures who are actually all around us. It's necessary to recall that language endangerment at the scale we now observe it on is not a natural process. It's a man-made process, and it's tied up very closely to various colonial legacies. Atkins, the then Commissioner of Indian Affairs, said in this very country, said, "In the difference of language today lies 2/3 of our trouble. Schools should be established which children should be required to attend, their barbarous dialects should be blotted out, and the English language substituted." We stand in opposition to this ideal, which amazingly still exists some 130 years later. And we rather stand with the late Joshua Fishman, a linguist from New York City, who said the destruction of a language is the destruction of a rooted identity. The notion of rooted identities applies just as much to languages as it does to neighborhoods. In this, I would have found much common ground with my fellow villager, Greenwich villager, Jane Jacobs. Thanks a lot.